Like I think all the things that we pursue for rest, like they're eventually gonna fail us. That's why we have to keep going back and back and back. And today, as we kind of walk through this passage in the book of Ephesians, I think it's healthy for us to understand what rest really should look like and how we actually do that. You see, because I believe the only way that we can fully rest and be refreshed is by knowing that you are deeply loved and wrapped in the grace of God. The only way that we will experience full, complete, holistic rest is actually by allowing for God to permeate our lives in a very real and powerful way. It's by allowing the love and the grace of God to just envelop you and bring you into this amazing, restful relationship with him. God's grace is favor and love towards the unworthy. Essentially saying that God looks at us because all of us are unworthy, and he goes, I love you so much. I'm gonna give you love you don't deserve, you couldn't earn. And I'm gonna give this love to you freely. This morning, we're gonna be looking at Ephesians 3, verses 14 through 21, which is what Bob read for us just a few moments ago. And in this passage, Paul is going to show us exactly what grace looks like for us. First of all, he wants us to be strengthened. In fact, if you go back to verse 16, Paul prays this. He says, I pray that out of his glorious riches, out of God's glorious riches, that God may strengthen you with power through his Spirit in your inner being. Paul is talking to the church. I think Paul is acutely aware that at times, for followers of Jesus, it's hard sometimes to remember the grace that God gives to us. It's hard at times to follow him. Because a lot of times, like, we try to do things ourselves. And Paul goes, no, do you understand that the grace of God is designed to strengthen you when you can't do it on your own because you can't do it on your own? And Paul's first part of his prayer is that we are strengthened, that we are challenged and encouraged by the fact that we don't have to do it on our own. And he goes, my prayer is that you fully experience that Christ dwells within your hearts. And not only that, that you are rooted and established in that love. Paul's prayer isn't just that you know God, but that he is your everything, that he guides your every moment, he guides your every step. And he's saying, look, my prayer is that you aren't rooted in all the things in this world that change and ebb and flow and try to conflict with your values and what I'm calling you to, but instead that you are rooted and established in the love of God, the grace of God, the very blessing that he gives to you. Paul's prayer is that we are strengthened, that Christ dwells within us, that we are rooted, but also that we know the depth of God's love. In verse 18, Paul writes that you may have the power, together with all the Lord's holy people, to grasp how wide, how long, how high, and how deep is the love of God. I think Paul's purpose in saying it in that way, like if you've read through Paul's epistles, like Paul doesn't usually mince words. Like he's not one of those guys that just uses a word by happenstance. He chooses them very specifically. And I think Paul understands that our humanity at times leads us to question whether God's love is good enough. We may not use those terms, but we may go, yeah, but you don't know my past, the mistakes I've made. You don't know who I currently am, the lie I'm living, the hypocrisy in my life. And we love to throw out these excuses. And God goes, but my love is greater than. This time last year, I actually wasn't here. I was on a leave of absence for 3 months because I was struggling with mental health, emotional health, and spiritual health. And a friend of mine on staff gave me a book, and they said, hey, you should read this book. I got through the introduction. Because at the end of the introduction, they ended with Ephesians 3:20 and 21. And the author said, did you read this verse? Now read it again. What's your obligation in this relationship? Because that passage says, to God, who can do immeasurably more than we can ask or imagine. To his power that is at work in and through us. Did you notice that we aren't doing anything? That's the power of God, the grace of God. When I tell you that it took me 2 more months to pick that book back up because that wrecked me so hard, that's the truth. Because I think when we understand that, our salvation isn't based upon who we are or what we present, but instead is based upon the free gift of grace, all of a sudden we can breathe a sigh of release. The grace of God is an amazing gift, my friends. When we understand that the grace of God does not look at us and judge us, when we understand the grace of God is freely given, when we understand that the grace of God is not about all the things that we have done, will do, have been, or even who we are in the present. When we understand that the grace of God is more than enough because it's all we need, I would assert it's in that moment that we can fully rest.